React, a JavaScript library for building modern application created by Meta, has over 51 million downloads and backed by one of the largest community of developers and contributors. So in this video, you will learn React from a beginner to a pro. You will learn the core concepts like GSS, components, props, states, and to more advanced tools like hooks, context API, Redux Toolkit, React Router, unit testing, and the recent update in React 19. So before we dive in, let's look at how React actually works under the React uses what we call a virtual DOM. You can think of it as a lightweight copy of the real web page. When something changes in a React application, React only updates the part that changes rather than rendering the entire page, which makes it faster and reduce the work the browser has to do. So let's go ahead and set up a React app. There are two ways to create a React application. We have the first one, which is the create React app, which uses Webpack under the hood. It's like the old way of creating a React application, and now it's currently deprecated. While Vite, which uses ES Build, is the modern and faster way and also the recommended way to create a React application. So before we jump into installation, make sure you have installed Node.js and VS Code or any code editor of your choice in your system. So once you are ready, let's dive in. Copy the command and let's head over to our code editor. And I'm going to paste it inside. I'm going to open my terminal. Then we should wait for this to, then you can select a project name. So I'm going to click on dot. So it creates the React app in this folder. I'm going to select React, TypeScript, and no, then say install. Yes. So you can see that it has created some files. So let's wait for this to install. Then we can go over the files in the code editor. So we've successfully created a React app and the server is running. So let's just copy this and paste it in the browser. And you should see the first boilerplate you will see when you create a Vite React app. Then you can click the button and this is counting. So let's just go over the files. So the first thing we are going to look at is the package.json. This is where this what holds the script. So we run npm run dev. If I cancel this, so you run npm run dev, and this is going to start up the server. Then we have npm run build. This is going to build the project. So we also have the dependency and dev dependency. We have the TypeScript, the TS config for Vite. Then we also have the Vite config. So this is what you can see the React is passed into the plugin in Vite. So let's go into the SLC. So before we go into SLC, so you can notice that we have only one index.html file. So inside the index.html file, you can see the title and you can see we have only a single HTML div with the ID root, and you can see the script which is pointing to the main.cxx, and that is going to be inside the source directory. So inside the main.cxx, you can see that we are calling the root here, and this is coming from the React DOM. Then this is going to create the you're going to create the app, and you can see the app here. So if we go into the app file, you can see the components that is rendering this what we are seeing on the web page. So this is the index.css and also the app.css. So I'm going to just remove most of this code. So let's delete the app.css. Then inside the app.txx, let's just remove everything. I'll just remove everything for now, and let's just save it. Then inside here, okay, it's going to give some error. So let's just let me write some function here. Just write the function first and don't put app, and just return. Let's just return a div. Let's say hello here. And let me export this app, and the error should stop and this should update. And we should see hello. It's going to show. Okay, we didn't run the server, so let's run the server. And I'm going to just run it, and you can see hello here. So I'm just going to also remove the same, just put a render button and just say click me. And then we can see the button. So the styling is because of the CSS that comes with the installation. So we can just remove the styling, and then this will result to the default button element. So this is how to set up a React application with Fit. What are components? Components are the building block of every React application. Think of it like a digital Lego pieces. They make up everything you see in a React application. Every React component is just a JavaScript function that returns GXS. In full term JavaScript HTML. So we've already defined the app components already. So let's go ahead and create more components. Let's create a button component. So I'm just going to move this up and I'm going to use ESCs this time. I'm going to say constant button. I remember every component starts with the capitalized character. So I'm just going to return, let's just open this and then let's call the button and let's just say click me here. So once we save it, this is a button component, and this button component can be reused across different components you've created in the application. So we can also use this component and render it inside this app component. So think of it like a child component used inside the parents component. So I'm just going to render the button here. I'm going to paste the button here. Then you can see that the button has appeared here. So this is now a child component to the app component. So I'm going to save that. You can also create the input component. So I'm just going to duplicate this and just say input. And then I'm just going to call this input. And then I can copy this and place it inside the app components and save this. Now we have an input. I'll just put a placeholder and say enter, and then you can see that the input is working. So currently, let's just remove the input components. I'll just remove this. So now we can see that we have a button component with the text click me. But how can we make this click me? How can we make this button dynamic? And you can see I can duplicate this. Let me comment this out. I'll just copy this again. And you can see we have three buttons, and these buttons are showing click me, click me, click me. But now, how can we make these buttons have different text in them? And that is where props in full term is called property. So props let you to send data from one component to another. Think of it like a custom attribute. So I'm just going to enable this button. And in your typical HTML file, we can pass attribute like type equals to button. You can pass on click here. Your typical HTML, this is how it works. We pass attribute to the elements. So this is what props does for in React component. So I'm just going to remove all of this. Now I want to make this click me dynamic. What I can do here, I can pass in text. Yeah. So I want to have a custom text property attribute here or property. I'll just pass text here, and then I'm going to say hello um click me here and just pass click me here, and I'm going to say um let me just give this hi here. So now how can we get this text inside the inside the button component? We are going to pass here props. So in a typical JavaScript function you will have arguments here, but here we say props here. So I'm going to passing these props now. You have access to the text. So I'm just going to let me get it here. So I'm just going to click cast and remove this and click me. Then I'll open an object here. This is how to type in JavaScript inside the GXS. So I'm just going to say props dot text. So prop is always an object. You can also extract it like this, props, and you can get text from it here like this. So there are two ways you can do it any way you want. So I'm just going to comment this out, then save this. Now you can see that our button. Let me comment this out. You can see that the button has dynamic text here. And if you notice, this is throwing a TypeScript error. So because it's telling us you need to set the property type. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to define type. And I'm going to call this button props or button prop type, or you can call it prop type. So I'm just going to open this. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say what are the attributes or the properties we pass into this button. So text, I'm just say text, and what is the type of text? I'm going to say that is string. So I'm just going to copy this, and then beside the props, I'm just going to pass it here, and the error should stop. You can also do this way, or you can import SC from React and just pass it like this. Let me just import this from React, and the error should stop. So I'm just going to use this other way. I prefer to use this. Sorry. Let me paste it here. And now the error should stop. So we have another unique property, or not property, a prop we can pass to the button. Think of it like the way we pass click me to a button. We didn't pass it as an attribute like text here. We are passing it directly open tag and close tag. But currently we don't have that with our custom button. So what I'm going to do is there's a prop called children in React. So I'm just going to remove this hello. Let me clear this out. And now I'm just going to close it too. Open and close it. And you can see that it's complaining, okay, text is missing because we passed text here. So I can just make this optional and the error should stop. And you can see that there's no text string for this button. So what I can do is I can pass this hello word directly in this. And you can see that this is showing an error. It said there's no children property in the type. So what we can do, we can copy this children and then come over here, pass it here. Let's set the type, and this is going to be type of React node. So what does this children pop? Let's just pass it here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove the text which we have here, or you can just say if there's no text, just pass in the children here. So I'm just going to let me comment this out, get the children from the property, and then let's just remove the prop, so like this. And you can see saying and children is missing here. Let's just comment this out. Let me also remove the text, and let's just remove the text here. And see now we can see that hello is working. We can see the say hello even when we make uh this button to have the open tag and close tag here. So with the children and property or prop, you can also pass in custom components. You can pass in a Java JXS here. You can see I can pass in any elements here or any even custom components. For example, we can have an icon. You can pass an icon here, and this will work because I've not defined the components. So I can define the components of icon now. So this component is just going to return a span, or just say icon here. And then I can copy this, and let me just remove the span and just paste it here. And you can see it's showing icon in the button. And this is what the children component allows us to pass in. So the children property allows us to pass in elements or custom components inside an existing component. So we can see. So let's look at another special property like the children. We have the children, which is a special property in React. We also have another special property. Let's just let's remove this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this icon first, and I'm going to try to create a list of buttons. Think of it like a nav bar, which you have different items there. So I'm just going to paste the item here. Let me just come over here. And this is like an item list of ID, home, about, and then contact. So we want our buttons to show a button to show home, about, and then contact. And instead of doing item index 0 like this, why is it showing error? Okay, number, sorry, this will not work. Okay, I will do dot label by this. instead of doing like this, one or two, which we show, we can see the, let me comment this out. We can see home, about, and contact. We can loop through the element, the components. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this item, this array, and then let me just remove this. Then I'm going to open this, which allows me to use JavaScript inside the JXS. So I'm going to say item.map. So I'm going to loop through the items, and I'm going to get the item, like each item from the array. Then I'm going to just return. We can just do like this, and then I'm going to move this button inside there. So this is similar to this is also similar to open tag and then use return and paste it like this. So this is similar to it. So once we do that, we can get item, and let me just paste here item dot label. And once you save this, the button works. But here's the problem: we need to add what we call a key prop. So this helps React to track each of the components, like the home, about each of the components which we've looped through, each of the component that is being rendered in the app. So what we can do, we can pass in the key, and then let's say item.id, and the key the value of the key props needs to be unique, and you can see React attributes key. So once you save that, everything we can see home and about and then contact. So basically, this is how to use the uh, how React property works. The we've talked about the custom property, the custom prop or custom attribute. We talk about the special children property prop, which we have passed, which we are passing here inside in the components. We also have the special property again, which is called key, which is being used to track each component when you loop through an array and render the components. So let's go ahead and look styling. So currently our button, we can see that it is using the default button style. So we can try and see how to use styling a React app. So there are many ways to style a React app. We've seen the first one, which is the index of CSS. You just define the index of CSS, but this is going to be global. So I'm just going to let's add in coming to the app. So like the way we do is class in a typical HTML file. Sorry, let's say button here again. In an HTML file, we can say class like this. But in JavaScript, I mean, sorry, in React, we don't define it like this. We define class name. So this is how to add class to React components. So I'm just going to do that here. So let me just do it here. I'm going to pass in button here, and then let me just call this style button. So let's look at how to add the style. So I'm just going to go into the index.css. I'm going to just paste this style here. And I'm going to save this. And this button, uh, this index.css is imported inside the main.css. So if you comment this out, you should not be able to see the style. So we're going to enable it, then you should see the style. So inside the app here, we can see that we're passing the class name and then the button, which is the name of the class name. So how do we pass it inside the custom button component? We can, as you've know, we can add in this. We have a custom attribute, and we can say btn, and then just copy this and come over here and let's pass in the prop type as a string, and then copy this. Let's get it from the prop, and then we can just pass in class name, and we use the JavaScript, and then pass it like this. Then you can see we have the style is showing in the buttons here. So this is great. This is how to add a custom CSS. So there are various other ways you can framework you can use to add style. We have the Chakra UI, we have the Material UI, we have the Ant Design. We have various open source styling and also custom components which you can use in the app, your app. But one of my favorites is Tailwind CSS. So let's see how to add Tailwind CSS inside the app. So Tailwind CSS provide us some classes. So you don't need to write your CSS classes, CSS in your index or CSS file. So it has already written everything for you. So you just take it and just paste it, and you can see the example, and you can see the way it is showing there. So to get started with Tailwind CSS, just click on Get Started, and then we can see there are different ways to add Tailwind inside your project. We have the Post CSS, Tailwind CI. We also have the CDN, which you can add directly to your HTML file. So since we have Vite here, we can come over here and let's copy this, and then we can head over to the code and let's install Tailwind CSS. So I'm just going to open my terminal, cancel this, and paste npm install Tailwind CSS and at Tailwind CSS Vite. So I'm just going to wait for this to install, and let's head over back to the browser. And the next thing we are going to copy is, okay, we are going to just add this inside the vite.config. And so I'll just copy this, or let's just copy this import, and then we're going to do that. And then inside the index.css, we can add this derivative imports and Tailwind CSS, and then we can start our server, and then you can start using it inside your uh, file. So let's go back to the code, and this has installed. So let me just open the vite.config.css mtx, and then I'm just going to paste this here. And let's copy the Tailwind CSS and add it as a plugin. And once you save this, we also need to add the derivative here at the top of this. So I'm just going to paste it here and we save it. So now we already have our Tailwind CSS added. So I'm just going to click on npm run dev, and this should start a server. So inside the app.txx, so what we can do, we can remove this button, and if I open this and just say bg, and you can see some style which is coming from Tailwind CSS. And how did I do this? I have some have installed an extension already, and this is going to, you can search for Tailwind CSS, and you should see Tailwind CSS is intelligent, which is going to show up when you type a Tailwind CSS class. So let's head over back to the Explorer inside the app.css. So I'll just close that. So now I can just say bg red, and I'll just say 500, and then you can see that this has changed the color of the button. So we can also make this, I'll just wrap this in a div, and then let me just give this a class name, and I want to add some spacing, so I can say flex, then flex row, then I can say gap 2, and then let's just add padding right 1, and you can see the spacing. So the same way we have the button in the index of CSS, we have color, we have padding, so we can copy padding 8 pixel and 16. I can also do the same thing here. I'll just say padding. I can say padding. Okay, let's say padding X. Padding X is for the right, the left and right. So let's find for, let's say 16, 8, 16. Then we have top 8 here, and for the top 8 is py or pt or pb. So I'll say py, and then py is So you can see that this is working fine. So typically, this is how to use styling in a React application. Also, let's not forget we also have the style. I'll just pass in style, the style attributes which we used in HTML. So I can see font size here, 18, 18 pixel, and you can see that we can say 25, and you can see it is working. So what I want to do, I want to create a better custom component, that a better custom button component that we also have a different color. So let's just come inside the SRC, and this is how I typically do it in a React app. We create a component here, and this is going to be useful to be reusable. You can create a folder here and call this button, and then I'll just say let me create index.txs here, index.txx, or you can just say button.txs, but I'll just leave it as index.txx. And then I'm just going to create a component, and to create a component I have this extension. If I go into extension, if I search for React, and you should see React ES7 Redux and then React Native. This is what I'm using to quickly create a React component. So inside here, I'm just going to say RAFC. They have different, you can see them here. We have the arrow function export component. So I'm just going to say RAFCE, and then this should create the component. So I'm just going to change this to button. Then button, save this here. And so inside the button, I'm just going to add the type at the top here. And it's just the same thing. So I'm just going to call this props type. And there we can pass in the prop type. And there I want in a way, if we go into the app.txs, so I want the way we can get all of the attributes here, like the on click, we have the type, all the attribute a button typically have. So instead of passing this, you have to pass in the type, you have to pass in the on click by yourself manually. This is much work. So what I can do for this custom button, I can come into my index.txs, and React has already provide that for us. So what I can do, I can remove these objects. Yeah, I'll just say React. So I'm just going to import the React. Then I'm going to say dot. So let me just import the React back. Oh, why is it not coming up? So I'll say import React from React, like this. So now I'll say React dot, and if I open React, we can look for a button HTML attribute. And so you can see there are different. So I'll just say button, and you can see that it's going to give us. Then I'm just going to open and close the stack, and then I'm going to import HTML button elements. So now if I just close this, now you see that this is going to give us all of the property that so anytime we can pass in any property here, and this will just directly add the prop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say button here, and I'm going to say button. And so what I can do, I can just say dot dot dot. I'm going to destructure the props inside to pass it inside the button element. So now let's also add the children. So what I can do is I can just say constant and children, and let's get that from the prop. So I want to get the children from the prop. So I'm just going to pass in the children here. and this should work. But since we're already passing the prop directly to the button, this is going to give us an issue. So what I can do is I can just say, let me just remove this children here and directly use it in the prop here at this place. Then I'm going to just say dot props. So this is going to tell JavaScript that we should remove the children from the prop. So I'm just getting the rest apart from the children. So others can be passed to the button while I get the children attribute or prop and pass it to this place here. So I'm going to save this now. I can copy this button, come over into app.cxs. Then going to remove all of this. Yeah, now I can import this. So I'm just going to import button from the components. Now the error should stop. So I can pass if I over this now. Let me see if you can see that I can get the on click. I also can pass in type. So all of the attributes a button we have is here, name, title, and others here. So let me just save this. So we are not done. Let's just go back to the button. Then I want to ask what I can add a property. Let's add a variant. I'm just going to extend this. I'm going to say and I'm going to pass invariant. So this variant is going to allow the us to pass in success, and once we pass in success, this is going to set a success type. So I'm just going to say or error or outline, and then I'm going to say ghosts here. So now we can get variants here. So now we've gotten the variants here. So now let's use this. So what I can do, I can create a base style. It's going to be the default style, or you can just do that here. You can do it here, or you can just add it directly into the button. So let me just do it here. I'm just going to say this is going to be px4 padding 4, then the same thing we did before. Then I'm just going to make the button let's give this rounded, that is a border radius, and then let's give this medium. This is font weight 500. Now I can just take this button and this base and just say class name, and instead of I'm going to open the JavaScript, this in parenthesis, and then I'm going to uh, put this here. Then I'm going to use dollar sign so I can pass in the base here to this class. Now, how do we use this variant? So what I can do is I'm going to say constant variant, and I'm going to say if success, this is the styling we are going to use, bg green 600, then text white, error bg red 600, bg red, yeah, 600, and text white, and then I'm going to say outline border, so border gray 300, and then text gray, let's give this 800. Ghost, I'll just say bg transparent, and text gray, or let's just say black, this one like this. Now let's get this variant, and there I'll just say I'll pass this dollar sign. Then I'm going to say variant and the index of, I'm just going to copy variant and pass it here. And this, this secret error undefined can be okay. Okay, because I said it's undefined. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to set a default value here, which is going to be success, and the error should stop. Then we should also get the class, so you can pass in custom class here, and I'm just going to add that here too. So now this is a typical button component you can use in different occasion. So let's recap. We define the type. We get the type for a button attribute similar to what we have in an HTML button. Then we combine it or we extend this how to do combine it with add more property like the variant. So we make the variant optional, so it's not compulsory to pass it. Then we define the default. So inside the property, we got the ones we need: the children, the variant, the class name. Then with the remaining one, this is it. So we tell JavaScript that we want this out of this. So this is can be called the rest, and you can just pass in rest like this. So this is better like this. So these are the property, and this is the rest other property you can pass, and the rest ones will be passed directly to the button. Then we define a base style. Then we have the variant. So anyone that is passed, we use the style. Then this is a custom style. So now if I go over back to my app, and then I can just remove this. I can remove the style, and we can also see the buttons now are now green. So we can pass. You can decide to pass variants here. You can see we can have success, error. Everything changes to error. We can change this to outline. We can change this to post and no style. And then this is how to create a custom button components you can use across the page. So let's go ahead and then look at how to make our app more interactive. State is a JavaScript object that holds data specific to a component and can change over time. So when a component state changes, React automatically re-render the component and any child component that depends on that change state. So we use what we call useState to handle state in a React app. So useState is a React hook which allows us to hook a feature inside a component. So we can import that from React. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to import state here. So let's import use state from React, and I'm going to say use state here. So with use state, we can use it to hold in data, like to make our app interactive. So what I'm going to remove all of these items here. Let's just remove this. So I'm just going to define a button here. And then let me just so we can use states here. So it's going to be equals to use state hook, and then use state hook returns what we call we can have an array here, and we get the state variable. So think of it as your typical uh variable, like let's say variable object. Then you define let's say a variable name Sam. So this is what useState is going to give us. Going to give us a variable that holds the state, and also a function that is used to update the state. So in a typical JavaScript file, you have to do like this, and then you can get the value from the document, from the HTML, and update the HTML. But in React, React can't work with this, so we use the useState to uh, get the variable. So I'm just going to, you can give it a name. For now, let's just call this count, and then the function to update the state, we have to first of all define it as set. Then we can just say set count here. So we can use this. So now if we hover over this, we now have to give a default or initial value. So our initial value for a count is on 0. So you can use array, you can have string, depending on what you want. And then you can set the type here. I'm going to set here to number. So it's going to tell React that this TypeScript that this is a type of number. So let's just say p tag here, and let's call the count here. Now let's just say give the name of the button to increment. So let me just give this a variant of outline like this. So now we have a count and we have the button to update to increment the count from 0 to 1. So how do we use? We can use the set count inside the button. So we can use the on click, and then to call the set count, we can just call a callback function passing the set count, and then we can say count plus 1. And then so let me just give this some space here. I'll say class name padding 5 like this. And then here I'm just going to say counts. So now if you try to click on it, make sure your server is running. And let's click on increment now. You can see that our button, you can see the count or the count variable is updating. And this is how to use state in React. You can also have object, array, or whatever type of data you want to store in a use state. So there's other way to use this. We can remove this count, and then set count gives us the previous state, a previous count. We can call this is called previous state, and then we can say previous state. So let me collapse this here. So previous states plus 1. I will save this. Now let me reload. So this start afresh. And then if I click on increments now, you can see that it still works. So instead of getting the count, we can get the previous count from the set count too. And so let's go ahead and look at another example. So I'm just going to comment this out, and I'm going to call this value, and then set value. So this is going to be of type string, and then this is going to be string. So this is we're going to define an input here. Sorry, input. And now once user type, we want to get the output here. So I'm just going to say p tag. I'm going to say value. And so now inside here, we're going to say type text. And there we're going to say value. We're going to pass in the value from the state. And to make changes, we're going to say on change. And we can get the events. Say set value. Sorry, this should be capital. And then we should say set value. And then let's just get the value e dot target dot value. And so let's save this, and then we should see the input here. And so the input is hiding, so I'm just going to add border here. And if you see the input here, you can add placeholder. And now if I type in hello, we should see that we are getting the update here. And then I can also call a button here. And then once I click on this button, I can use the alert and then pass in uh, this is input value. And then let me just change this to this. And then I'm going to just pass in the value here. So once I save this now, and if you type in, I'll just type in more. And then if I click on increment, we should see we should say that this is showing the input value and the value that is gotten from the state. So this is how to use state in a React application. So we've seen two examples, the count and the input. So let's go ahead and look at more other hooks. So the other powerful hook in React, such as the effect hook, which is used for side effect like data fetching, event listener, calling of browser API, typically to access external system. We have the ref hook, which is used to reference a DOM element directly. We have the context hook, which is used to share data across components without prop drilling. We have the performance hook, which is used to optimize the render and performance in a React app. Then we have resource hook, which is new in React 19. So it lets you to read data directly from promise or context inside a component. So there's no need to use effect hook for data fetching. So you use all these hook at some point, but most of the time you will mainly use the use state hook, use effect, and then use ref. Let's see how to use effect to fetch data in a component. So let me comment all of this out, and then I'm just going to push this down here. So let's define the use effect here. So I'm going to say use effect. This is coming from React. So let's just import it from React. Then you can see that this is showing some TypeScript error. It requires one or two arguments. So a use effect takes in a function, use the arrow function, also an array. So the array is what we call dependency. So this function, once you pass or once you leave the array empty, this tell use effect to only run this function once the page or once this component mounts. That is once this component is shown on the screen. So, but once you put a value inside here, this will tell React use effects or to call this function anytime changes is being anytime the value you put the variable you put here changes. So let's see an example for fetching an API. So we are not going to add any dependency here. So I'm going to call uh, the fetch function, and then I'm going to pass in an endpoint here, and I'm going to use the JSON placeholder type code.com, and I'm going to pick user one. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it here. So once I paste it here, then we can just say dot then, and let's get a response. So since we're using fetch, we're going to have to use response.json here. Then I'm going to say dot then. We are going to then get the output. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this to user. So it's going to bring we're going to get the user, because this is a single user. We're going to get the user and update the state. So I'm going to say set user. And obviously this is not going to be a string. This is going to be an object. So I'm just going to you can set object here. Let me just remove this like this, and then this should work. So, or you can set this to null as the initial value. Then you can set the type here. I'll just say type user type name string, and then you can say email string. So, and you can just set the type like this. You can set all the type you have here. Then you can say or no, and that script will stop throwing an error. And so we can set user here, and then we can catch the error. I'll just say dot catch. If there's any error, we can say let's duplicate this. I'll just say the states which we're going to store the error. I'll say set error, and set error is going to be string. And so I can just say set error, and then pass in error the message. Then I also want to show a loading state. So I'm going to duplicate this again, this state, and I'm going to say is loading. And then we're going to say set is loading. And here we can set this to Boolean like this. So I'm going to say dot final, sorry, dot final, which we're going to call the set is loading. And we're going to pass in false here like this. So now this is empty. So this is only going to call this endpoint once this page load or once this component mount. So I'm just going to come down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come down here. So I'll say if it's loading. So if it's loading, then return. So this is a fragment. You can just set div here. I'll just say loading. Then I'm going to say if we have any error, then return. I'll just call maybe a div or a p tag for say error of fetching user. So now if this is not loading and there's no error, then we can make use of the user. So I'll just say let's just say div here h1. I'll just say user dot name, then p tag user dot email, and then we can console log user here. So save that, make sure the server is running, and let me comment this thing. Let me comment the button out, and then let's go to, and then you can see that the name has appeared here. So if I inspect this and console log this, go to and you can see the objects here. So you can see how we can use useEffect to fetch, and if I console log directly from the useEffect, I'll say dash dash useEffect. And let's save this, and then let's go back to, and now if I try to reload this, you should see and use the first mount. After you can see the endpoint, and this is working fine. So you can see that the use effect, the console log we did inside the use effect only called once here. And this is how to use effects for data fetching. So the other example of using use effects is for side effects. So we're going to also give an example now on how to pass in dependency here and when to use this here. So I'm just going to copy all of this, and so let me comment this out, and I'm going to just remove everything I did here. And so I'll just remove this here. So I'm going to change this um to count. So I'm just going to say count is equals to use state, and this is going to be type number, and then this is going to be type boolean. So we have threshold cross and then set threshold cross here. So we have count and set count. So what we want to do is when the user click on the button, once it reaches the threshold, we want the this to update to true or false, and we can do that with use effect here. So I'm just going to go back to where we had that button example, this increment. So I'm just going to copy this example here and push this down. Then below here, I'm just going to paste it here. I'm going to uncomment it out. And let me also import the button back. So now what I want to do here is below here, I'm going to say p tag Yeah, I'm going to say threshold. So threshold cross. Then we can say threshold. If threshold cross is true, then we just say return true. Else we say false here. And so now let's get the use effects. And so let me just remove all of this here. So inside here, I'm going to say if the count is greater than 0 and count module 5, sorry, module 5 is equals to 0, then we can just say console.log. So let's say we are sending an analytics to when a user click the button. I will just say threshold threshold user which. So let me change this thing. So we can pass in the $sign here and say count clicks. So and then I want to set the threshold plus true. Then else we can say set threshold to false. And you can see that use effect hook is telling us that we are missing a dependency, either add it or remove it. So because we've passed in, you're using count inside this function, use effect need the count to update. That is to call this function again when the count changes. So for now, I'm not going to pass the count. So I'm just going to disable that line. This is coming from ESLint. So once I save this now, and now you can see threshold cost is false. So I'm just going to I'm going to just play this. So I'm just going to let me just copy the use effects mount as a comment. Sorry, console log. Then I'm going to pass it here. So we can see when the use effect mounts or is called once we load this page. So I'm just going to reload now. And you can see that use effect mount is being called, but nothing changes here. So I'm just going to click on increments now, and you can see that we've passed 5, we've passed 10, nothing happens because use effect hook does not get the updated count. And the only way to make use effect to get the updated count is to pass the count here. So I'm just going to remove this, and then if I pass in the count now, save this, and I'm just going to reload this. And you can see this is a first initial mount. This is a first call once we load this page. So once I click on count now, you can see that uh, you can see as we're clicking, the use effect is being called now. Once I reach 5, this is going to console log this, and then the threshold is going to change to true. So let's click again 4, 5, and then you can see user reach 5 click, and this is true. So once I click again, and you can see that this has changed to false. So because we set else here, and once I click again to 10, this has set to true, and we can see the log here. So this is how to use use effects hook when you want to call when you call it, and how to get past in the dependency in a use effects hook. So this is an example. So in React 19, there's a new update for the use effect to solve a particular issue with use effect, and that is a use effect event hook. So the use effect event is used to avoid adding unnecessary dependency in the effect. So um, since we are using use count as a dependency in the use effects now, and this will fine. There are some times where you might add a dependency, and this will cause use effect to render all the time, and which can cause issue with your app. So, and then there are sometimes you might need it, the dependency, to get updates. But use effect event now helps to solve the issue. So you can call what you want to call inside your use effect, and you can see get the updated data. So I'm just going to do that here. So I'm going to show you how an example of how use effect event is going to solve the issue of unnecessary dependency effects. So I'm just going to comment all of them. I'm just going to remove all of this out. And then I'm just going to remove the threshold. We don't need it for this example. So I'm just going to remove the threshold here. So we have the count as we have before. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to show the count here. And so this is the count. Then I'm just going to try to use the set interval. So I'm going to say interval id is equals to set interval. And inside the set interval, we're going to give this, let's say, 1000. There's one. Then I'm going to console.log. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say latest accounts, and then like this. So now we need to use this event interval. So we are calling this set interval. So we want to clear the interval. So we add this function here. This is a first function also has a return. So we can just say return. This is going to call another function, and then we can say clear interval, and then we can pass in the ID. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this console log, then pass it here, and then I'm going to see use effects and clean up. So yeah, use effects clean up like this. So now this is what we need. So now if I check my server, make sure it's running. So now if I just reload the app, you should see the use effect mount count 0, use effect cleanup, use effect cleanup, and this is the set timeout is working now. But here's the problem. Let me clear this now. So if I try to click on the increments now, this will cause the use effect to load again, and then it's going to create a new server and set interval. If I try to increment again to 2, this is going to create a new, it's going to clean up the previous one, the previous interval, and then it's going to create a new one. And you can see that here. So, and this is not what we want. We don't want to always create a new interval every time we click on the button. So, and that is where we don't want to be passing the uh, count. If I don't pass the count and I reload, this work. You can see that if I click, everything works well. But we are not getting the updated count from the latest count, right? From the inside the set interval. We're not getting the latest count, but everything works well. You can see the set interval is running and the increment is working fine, but we're not getting the updated count inside the use effect. And that's where use effect event comes in place. So we can use effect to get the updated count without passing the count as a dependency in the use effect. So I'll just say I'll just paste in the use effect event, and then we can just call a function the same way use effect is. But the only difference is that we are going to say console, let's call it log count, and then we can just say console.log. Let's just copy the same thing we have here, but this time we are going to say from use effect event. Now we have removed the count from the dependency array. Now let's just copy this log count and then let's remove this. And if we remove this, let's pass this function here. So it is going to keep on complaining about count because we are using count here. What I'm going to do, let me just remove all of this count from and now it's just going to ask for the logout count here. Uh, this is just the ESD constant training error. So now we have the logout count here, and then we have the logout count here. There's no count in the use effect hook. So I'm just going to reload my server now, and then you can see that this is the first initial amount, which is the use effect amount and the cleanup. So it has created the interval and which is running now. So now let's increment. Okay, so this is still let me remove the log count here. So let me reload again. And then they should start counting. The interval is working. So let's click on increment. And you can see that we are getting the updated count, the updated count inside the log count method here, the use event. And then we're now having the issue of the interval creating again. So this is working. So now this is the use of use effect event that React just released. So we are done with the use effect hook. Let's look at the resource hook, which is the use hook, and that is going to be for our data fetching. So I'm just going to remove all everything I have here. So let me quickly clean this up. So I've quickly cleaned up the app page. I've removed everything. So what we want to do is a use hook. So I'm just going to import use from React. So this is a new hook from React. So I want to use it for data fetching. Previously, we used the effect hook for data fetching. So let's use it. So what we are going to do, we're going to just come down here. Let's remove this. So let's just change this to let me remove it. So we're going to create a function first. So I'm going to say async um, function. Let's create a function. We're going to call it fetch user, and then we're going to call the same thing we did before. Response is equals to await. Let's use await fetch, and then let me call the endpoint we use. So I've pasted it here, and then what we can do, we just use if not response dot okay, or you can use the other way if you don't want to use the async, but we need to use the async when we're using the use so I'm just going to say not okay. Then I'm going to just say if there's an error, just throw new error field to fetch user, and then we can just return a response dot json like this. So let me just make this shorter. So now what we are going to do, we have to create a component for this. So I'm just going to say user display, or you can call it user message. Then you're just going to return. Let me just copy the same thing we have here. So copy that, paste it here, and then uncomment this out. So this should be like this. So now we need a user. So what we can do, we can say constant user is equals to use hook. So the use hook require, remember we said hook require promise or context. So for now, we need a promise, and this is fetch user. So if we try to pass this fetch user here, this is going to cause an issue. I've tried it. So what we can do in order to get a promise, we are going to pass promise as a prop. So we're going to say sorry uh ugh, user promise, and then we can just say pass the type. Let's just pass any here like this. Then we're going to just pass in the user promise here, and this work. So I'm just going to copy the user display, or yeah, you can just pass in user promise of type promise, and we can pass in the user. I've cleared the user data, so I'm just going to use any for now. Let's just, and then yeah, I'm just going to call that user display component here. So it's going to require us to pass the user promise. So how can we get a user? We can get a user promise using the use state. So with use state, you can just say call a function which we call the fetch user. Then we can get the promise here. So we just say user promise, and then just copy this and pass it here. And once you save this, now this should work. So let me reload this. Now we're not seeing any response here. So this is calling multiple times. So let's wrap this component with suspense. So I'm just going to use suspense here from React. So this is going to await the component before the component load finish. So once the component is still loading, we can provide a callback, sorry, a fallback. Think of it as the initial UI that shows. So I'm just going to say loading user data. Then I'm going to save this. And once I save this, let me reload this now. And then we should see the user data. So this is typically how to use the use hook together with suspense for fetching data. So instead of using the use effect, you can then use the use hook. So let's look at the use ref hook. So I've quickly cleared out the code. So let's look at the use ref hook. Like I said earlier, the use ref hook is used to access the DOM directly. So let's import use ref from React. Then here we're going to also use it with use effects. So that is where we're going to. So let's import the two of them. Then inside here, I'm just going to say let's say h2 here. So I want my input field to be autofocus one, to be focused when this page mount, this component mount. So I'm just going to add an input element here. And let me just put a placeholder. I'll just say type something like this. So how can we access the ref to make it focus once the component mount? We can use the use ref. So I'm just going to come up here, and I'm going to say constant input ref is equals to use ref, and then we're going to set the initial value, which is null, since we don't have the we don't have we have not connected it to the element yet, so it's going to have an initial value of null. So let's get the input ref, and then we can pass in the ref um, attributes here. So you can see the ref components, and once the amount ref will be set, ref will be set ref dot current to null. So that's what we say is to null here. So you can also set the type to here to HTML input elements. So this is just for the type and the TypeScript error. The error should stop. So now we've accessed the ref, and then we can just console log this. And then let's see this in action. So I'm just going to go to my console log, and then you can see the output here. So if I just reload this here, and you can see this is set to null. Sorry, current input now. And you can see you can access almost everything a typical HTML has in an input element. Yeah, you can see that here we have the attributes, we have the default value, the labels, and some other stuff. And you can see inputs. So now, but this is not focused yet. You can see that once we reload, and this is not set to focus. So we can use the useRef to do that. And the useRef, we have to use this inside the useEffect hook. So let's just call the useEffect and just pass an empty array like this. Then inside here, we're just going to say if input ref, since input ref has an initial value of null, so we're going to say if input ref dot current, then we can say input ref dot current dot focus, and you can see we're having all of it. I'll just say this to by this, and we're not adding any dependency to this. I can also make changes to current dot style dot background. Let's do background color. Let's say this is going to be equals to blue. Then I can say input ref dot current dot value is equals to hello. So this is not going to change because let's just try to reload this again. So I'm just going to reload this now. And then we should see that this is in focus. So if I just comment this out here, save this, and then reload this, and you can see that the input is in focus now. If you click out, then we lose the focus. So you can just enable this now, reload this, and you can see the input value here. So this is how to use the useRef hook in React. So we also have passing of ref to a child component. So let's make this input a component, a React component, and how we are going to pass the ref. So they've made changes to it in the React 19, but I'll show you how it was done previously and how it has been done now. So I'm going to come over here and let me create the component. So I'm just going to say constant input. Let's call this input is equals to let's return input. So I just copy the same thing I have here. And so let me just copy this, and I'm just going to paste it here. So let me just remove this ref, and I'm going to just copy this input and then replace it with this, and this should show on the screen. So now we need to pass in the ref. So the previous way of doing this is we use what we call the forward ref. So this is how we do it before. We pass in the forward ref. We have to import that from React, and then you wrap the entire app with it, and now we can get the ref from there. So I'll just say ref, and then I'll pass in ref is equals to ref here. And then this is going to throw some TypeScript error, so we need to pass in stuff. So we also need to get the props here. So props is going to be at the front, while ref be at the back here. So I'm just going to pass this some type. I say HTML input element. So just pass that here. And then we can also say comma. We just pass in the input HTML attributes. And then that's one we also have the HTML elements like this. So currently we're not using the prop, but you can use the prop now to just the structure inside here. You'll see props here. And this will allow us to just pass in the necessary attributes for input here. So now you can see that we have this. Now if you come over to input, if you click here and you type in value, you can see the autocomplete here. We can, and this is showing because of the type we've passed. And again, we've passed in the props directly to here. So let's look at the use ref. So I'll just pass in ref here, and I'll just say input ref here. I'll save this and then let me reload this. Let me reload the browser, and you can see that it worked with the input component, the custom components. So let's look at how to implement this without the using the forward ref. So in React 19, instead of doing something else, I'll copy this and then comment this out. I'll just remove forward ref. So instead of using the forward ref, you can pass the ref directly. So I'll just remove this. So we can pass the ref as a prop directly. So I'll just say ref, then I can structure any other prop. So this is optional. If you don't want to pass this, I'll just remove it like this. Then we can set the type. I'll just say type props type, and let's just pass this here. And here you can see ref, let's import ref objects from React. And so we're going to just give this the same thing we pass here, which is HTML element or null by this. So we're going to do the same thing here, HTML input element or null. And then the error should stop. So I'll just comment this out. And this is, so let me reload this. And you can see that it's working. So with React 19, the ref is passed directly, which makes it more easier and simpler than using the forward ref. So that is it for the useRef hook. So we are going to go ahead and look at the custom hook. So let me copy everything and clear this out so here can be clear. So I'm just going to create a file here and just paste all of this useRef. So we'll go into the app.cxs and then let me just remove everything. So let me just export this. So now to create a custom hook, we can do that here. Uh, so I'm going to create a hook which I will call use and disclosure. So I'm just going to return. So to define a custom hook, you need to set the use at the front of the name of the the name of the function you're creating. So since I'm going to use the use hook, I'm going to be creating a this closure hook. So inside this hook, I'm going to get the use state hook, use state, and this use state is going to have an initial value. So I'm just going to say let the hook accept an initial value, and this is going to be false by default. So then I'm going to pass the initial value to the use state. Then I can say is open and set is open. So this hook is mainly to toggle the visibility, hide and show like that. So I'm just going to say constant on open. Then I'm going to say set is open and true. Then I can duplicate this as set is open false. I'll just say this is for on close. And then you can also have for on toggle, we can just say get the previous state, and then let's return not of a previous state, and this can be on toggle here. Then we can return the is open on open, on close, and then on toggle, and that is it. So we can make use of this now. I can do this here. I'll just say constant is equals to use closure, and then I'll just set initial value to false. Or we can also just set this to, this can be optional if you set a type, but since we don't set a type there, we'll just leave it like this. Then we can get is open and on toggle. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to return a div. Yeah, let me give this back a class name is sys. And then here I'm just going to say if is open, then we are going to show a div. I mean, and I'm just going to give this div a class name with 20, height 10, and then bg background. Let's give this 500. So it's just a small box here. Then we have a button. Let's use our button. This I'm using the custom button. This custom button we define. So let's just say outline like this. Then I'm just going to say if is open, then we are going to show hide. Then if is open is false, we're going to show I also show box like this. So now we need to set this to on click, and then we can just pass on toggle here. Why is it not working? So I think okay, because we need to set the type. So I'll just use a normal button. Or let me use something like this. Okay, I think I made a mistake here. Yeah, I made a mistake here. This should be a function. This should be a function. So I can just directly pass the on toggle here and the error should stop. So let's reload this. So make sure the server is running. Now we can see the show box here. So currently the show box is hidden. If I set the initial value to true and I reload this now, you can see the box here. So let me just give this some space here. Then you can see that this is showing hide button because the is open is set to true. The initial value is true, which is the use in the use state. So let me set it back to false. And then I'm going to just reload this. Now if I click on show box, I can toggle this, hide and show. This is a simple hook we just created. And to place the hook in our file, we can create a hooks folder, and there you can just create use um, disclosure dot txx sorry tx And then you can just copy everything we have here and paste it here. And then you can export this default use disclosure. And let's import the states and save this. Now you can import, remove this now. So we can just import the use closure hook from the hook folder, and then everything still works well. So that is it for hooks. So let's go ahead and look at the context API. Context API helps to share data across components without passing prop through every level of the components. That is what we call prop filling. So for instance, you have a sidebar component here and a main bar component or main content component. So for instance, you also have a component inside a sidebar, which two components inside the sidebar, one which toggles the theme of the app, and that component, that prop is also needed in the main contents and almost everywhere in the app. So passing props down each of the level is not the best way to make your app more efficient. So React require us, if you have to pass prop through every level of the components, like through every child components down, or you need the prop everywhere, it's preferable to use what we call the context API. With context API, it helps us to share data across, so without having to pass prop through every level of the component. So let's look at how to how to use the context API, which is very, very simple. So I'm just going to remove this hook. We don't need all of this hook. And so let me just remove the sidebar. Let me just create a simple text component, for example. Yeah. Then below here, I can just say a function, and then I'll just create the text component. And I'll just return, let's say, a paragraph. I'll say, let me just create a div here first. Or let's just say a paragraph here, like this. So now to use the context API inside the passport through the text components down to the from the app down to the text components, we can use the context API. So how do we define this? We can say constant context. So let me just say context here, and this is a capital letter. I'll just say React, just say React dot, and just say create context, and this is the only thing you need. So let's import React from, sorry, from React. So now to make use of this context, so yeah, this is TypeScript showing some error, so you need a default value. Or you can set it to null, you can set it to undefined. So that's it. So now this context, we can get the context provider. So you need to wrap the entire app with what we call the context provider, and we can get that from inside this context. So what we can do inside this app, we can just wrap everything here. So I just wrap this and say context dot. You can see we have consumer, we have provider. So we're going to be using the provider, and then let's move this inside the provider. Now the provider requires to pass the value. So what do you want? Which data do you want to share across different components? So across the app, we can just define a use state hook here and say let this for example, we want to handle the light theme, dark and light, to switch between light and dark mode. So I'll just say theme and set theme. Now we can pass in the theme and set theme to the value. So we just open the system object. So we're passing the theme and we're passing the the set theme. Now we have access, and this is just throwing some TypeScript error. Okay. It needs us to pass in the type. So I'll just set this to not any for now, and the error should stop. We are going to later create it with the types too. So let's just set it to any for now. Now we can access this theme right inside the text component, because the text component is wrapped inside the text component is inside the context provider. So now how do we get the theme? So we can just say constant, and there is where the use context hook comes in. So we can import that from React, and then the use context requires the context itself. So we'll pass in the context inside the context use context hook. Then yeah, you can get the theme, and you can get the set theme. Now, if I just let's just set a div here. So I'll just say p tag. I'll just render theme, and let me just have a simple button here. I'll just say if theme is equals to light, then we can say switch up. Let's just let me just say switch theme, and then I'm just going to say on click. We can say set theme. Then we say theme. If theme is equals to light, then we can just switch it to dark. We can update it to dark. Else we can just say light, like this. So now this is it. Let me just comment this button. Now, now we can see the button here. Uh, let me use a let me use this button. So this is more clearer. So I'm just going to replace this with this button. And now we can see the button is showing. So let me just create a space. Now you can see that we're having a light. Now if I click on switch theme, you can see that this has switched to dark. You can switch back to light, and you can switch that to dark. So this is how to use context and the context API in React. So you can see that we didn't pass any prop inside the text down to this text components, but we can access the state, the prop. We can access the state there from the app component. So this is how to use. So let's go ahead and then write this in the way you write it in a React application. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a folder, and we are going to call this context here. So we need to name the file. Sorry, inside here we're going to call this file team and provider.txx, yeah. So we can have the team provider here. This is where we're going to define the team context, and then we can import that inside the app components. So this is how it works. So inside the team provider, so let's go back to the app and let's copy this. So we need this. And so I'll just let me copy everything like this, come back into the team provider and just paste it. I'll just remove the button. We need the use context and we need the use state. We need this. So now let me set the type here. So I'm just going to say type is so I'm going to call this team context type. Then I'm just going to return. This is going to take in the theme, and then this is going to be light and dark mode. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to define the theme type here, which is going to be equals to light or dark. And so I'm just going to copy this and paste it here like this. Now we can just change this name to theme context, and then let's pass in the theme context type here, and then we can just say no like this or undefined. So now this is it. So we can make use of this inside the app component, but the best way to do it is to create the child component here. So create a component here. So we can just say team provider is equals to, and let's return this. So because we are going to be wrapping this in the app, we are going to wrap this team provider inside the app that okay, to wrap this, so we need to pass in what we call children. This is a custom component, so we need to pass in the children prop here, and then we can set the type of children to React. The way import React, yes, React node like this. And so this return, we are going to just use the same thing we did inside the app. Remember, we use context of provider. We can just copy this, come back into the theme provider, and let's just paste this. Now we need to change this to theme dot provider and theme context of provider. Now we can also define the state. So I'll just copy the state here, and I'm just going to paste it here. And so now let's add the type here to theme type, and then let's replace this with the children prop. Now it's saying that we didn't pass in the set. We can just do that here. Set, and we can set theme is equals to theme type here. Or you can also set toggle theme, and this will just be void. So now it's complaining that it's missing the toggle theme. So we can just define the toggle theme here. We can say constant toggle theme is equals to set theme, and then we say previous. We can get the previous state. We say previous, if previous state is equals to light, then we can switch it to dark, else we can switch it to light. And so now I can copy this and just pass it here. And so let me just remove this, like this is okay. Now you can see that we are done with this. So now instead of, so inside the app component in the text component here, we made use of the use context. So using this here directly, we can instead create a custom hook inside here. So we are going to call this export constant use theme hook. And then let's just return constant context. So we can say context is equals to use context. Now we need to pass in the context here, which is the theme context. And so let's pass it here. Now you know that the theme context can be null. So what we are going to do, we are going to say if there's no context, then we can just throw new error and say use theme within a theme provider. So if you do not use theme inside the provider that is inside the child component that is inside this theme context of provider, this is going to throw an error. And so let's return context here. So you can also copy this and just create a hook file here and put it here. So I'm just going to leave everything here. And so I'm just going to remove this TypeScript error. I mean, sorry, the ESLint error warning. So now this is how to create a theme provider or theme context that we can use in our app. So now if I go into the app, so make sure you export the theme provider and also the use theme hook. Then inside the app now, I can just replace this with. So I don't need to write all of this. I'll just replace this with theme provider. I'll just import this, remove this states, remove this line. We don't need all of this. Now this we can just say use theme. And then let me just remove React. Now yeah, I can reload this and you can see it's working. I can switch to light, dark, light. So this is how to use the context API in React. So while context API is great for sharing data, but in large application with complex states, it can become hard to maintain or manage. So this is where Redux comes in. So Redux is a state management library for JavaScript that solves this by providing a central store that is a procedure store that you can access all the states and also and it's predictable and you can see it's central and also flexible. So we can see how to use this. So I'm just going to click on get started and then this is how to use how to use Redux. Just scroll down and then Redux also have what we call the Redux Toolkit here. So that they are the old way of writing Redux, but Redux now says we should use Redux Toolkit as the official recommended approach of writing Redux logic. But I'm going to show you how to use the core Redux. Then we are going to also see how to use Redux Toolkit. So let's go ahead and then look at how to use the core Redux. And you can see, okay, this is using Redux Toolkit. So let's go ahead and see. Okay, this is an example of the Redux itself. And you can see that Redux is divided into two. We have the action. You can see we have reducer, we have action and reducer. So an action is an object that describes what should change in a state. Then we also have the reducer, which is the function that updates the state based on the action. Think of it as the where we write state where we have the value and also the set value. So action describe what should change in the state, while reducer updates the state based on the action. And so let's go ahead and look at that in the code. So I just go over to the code and then yeah. So the first thing we need to do is to install Redux. So I'm just going to cancel my server and then say npm install Redux. And then we're going to also install React Redux here. And let's wait for this to install. So now this is running, so I can run my server back. And so let me close this. So now we've installed the Redux. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove these components, remove the theme, remove everything here. And let me just return a div with a class name of padding C, something like this. So now let's import Redux here. So the first thing we're going to do is to import Redux. So I'm just going to import, so we're going to import create stuff from Redux, and then we're going to say create store. So we're going to create store, and you can see that create store now is deprecated. So you say you have to use Redux Toolkit. Recommended ways to use Redux Toolkit. So we're going to look at that too. So we're going to also import React, get the React Redux, but we're going to do that later. So the first thing we're going to do is to create the action. So the action we want to do, so what we want to do is the same increments we did previously. And then I think I have the example here. This same count increment. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to just bring it back here. So basically, this will just be a button that increases the count as a count. So the count keeps on going, adding and adding. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a function and I'm going to call this increment. So this function will return an object which is going to have the type, and this type we're going to call this increment. And so this is going to create the action object. So we also have payload, but I'm just going to show you the type. So now with this increment function, we are going to make use of it um, with the Redux here. So the first thing we're going to also do, we've done the action here. Let me just create action. So now we need to create the reducer. So the first thing we need to do for the reducer, we need to we need to set the initial value we're going to use. So I'm just going to say the initial value of the state. So I'll say initial state is going to be an object of count 0. So like this. Now let's create the reducer itself that helps to update the state. So we're going to call this count reducer, which is equals to state. And we're going to say state is going to be equals to the initial state. Then action, we're just going to set this to any for now. So the reducer takes in the state and the action. So I'm just going to set this to any entire file. And then what we're going to do, we're going to use the switch. So since the action has an object of type, so we're going to say action dot type. So we can say case, if case is increment, so just copy increment, then we can just update the state. So we can return an object. Now this object, we can destructure the state, the initial stage. Then we can update the state by saying count is state dot count, and you can see that state has access to count. Then we can say plus 1 here. So save that. So this is it. So you should also know that the initial value can be a single value, or if you want to add more value, you can use count. So let me just change this to initial to a single value. And then this is going to try an error. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say, since this is not an object, the state is not an object. So I'm going to say state plus 1 like this. So we can also have decrements. I'm just going to paste that here. I'll say decrement, which is decrement. Then we can say yeah. Then we can also do for the decrements too. So I'll just say if is decrement case decrement then state minus 1. Then we also need to return default value, and the default value we're going to return the states. So now we are done with the action. We also have the initial value, and then we have created the reducer which takes in the state and the action. So now let's create the store. So the store, which is we're going to pass in the reducer to the store. So we're going to say constant store is equals to create store, and then we can pass in the counter reducer here. Now we've created a store, and now we can make use of this store to wrap the app. So what I'm going to do, so the same way we use context provider, Redux also have provider which is coming from the React Redux. So we're going to take this provider, wrap the entire app. Let's move this inside, and here we're going to pass in store, and let's just pass in the store. So save this. Now we need to we can make use of uh, the increments and decrements in our app. So I'll just move this inside a component. So let me create a component here. I'll say function. I'll call this counter, and then let me just remove this, and let's just return. Let me create. Okay, let me just paste what I copied here. So I've pasted the button and the text. So you can see, just make sure this is wrapped like this. Now we can use the counter components inside the provider, inside the app here. Now the error should stop. So how do we then to update the states? So we can make use of a hook which is created to get the state. We can use the useSelector hook which is coming from React Redux. We say useSelector, and to update the state, we can use the use dispatch hook. And so let's come down to counter, And let's say constant, to get the count, we can say constant count is equals to use use selector, and the use selector is going to give us the state, and let's just say state here like this. So I'm just going to let me set any here or number like this here. So to also handle the updating of the state, I'll just use the dispatch is equals to use dispatch group. Now we can just say on click, let's remove the set count, and I'll just say sorry, dispatch, which is going to take in the increment. So the increment is coming from the action which we created there. So we can also do the same thing for the decrement. So I'll just copy this, paste it here, and I'm going to just change this to decrements. Just replace this like this. So now this is it. So we are done with setting up Redux in our app. We've created the action which we are going to use across the app. Then we've created the initial state. Then we have the count reducer, which is passed to the create store. Now we have the store. We pass the store to the provider coming from the Redux. We had Redux. Now we made use of the use selector to get the state, and then we have the dispatch. Use dispatch to increment and decrement. So I'm just going to make sure my server is running, and then yeah, let's try and then see if this will work. So I'll increment, and you can see it's working. I can click on decrement and it's going down, so it's working properly, and this is working very fine. So the reason why we're getting a count is because the count is set to 0. If for any reason we had to do count 0, then the state is going to be an object, so we can do dot count here. So but now we just set it uh to a single value, which is 0. So now we have seen how to use Redux, which is the old way of writing Redux. So let's look at how to use the Redux Toolkit, which is recommended by Redux itself. So what we're going to do, we're going to install Redux Toolkit. So I'll say npm install Redux at redux.js/toolkit. So click on enter and you'll see how Redux Toolkit make it easy for us. So I'm just going to install that. So let's wait for this to indicate as installed. So I'll run my server. So once the server is running, then what we can do, the only thing we are going to change using the Redux Toolkit is only this action and the reducer. So we don't need all of this. So let me just define that. So what we are going to do, we are going to import instead of create store, so we're going to also change the store. So let me just remove all of this here first. I'll comment them out. Then instead of use store, so I'll say Redux, sorry, at Redux Toolkit. And then here we're going to use the configure store. Then we are also going to need create slice. And so we can just say constant counter slice. So we're going to use create slice, and the create slice is going to take an object which we're going to give the name of the we're going to give this a name. I'll just call this counter. Now we also pass in the initial value. So yeah, the initial state, which we set it before to 0. Uh, then we need to also define reducer here. And reducer is an object that takes in the method here. So I'm just going to say increment So I think this is what we did here, this increment. We are going to just do that here. I'm going to say increment, which we take in the state, as you know, reducer takes in the state. So now we can just say state dot count. Sorry, state plus one, not state dot count. So I'll just return this like this. So it also takes in the action also. You can also define the action. Yeah, and this action can retrieve payload. So I'm just going to remove the action. So we can also duplicate this and change this to decrements. Is what we use here. I'll just say -1. Now, how do we use the counter slice here? So the counter slice is going to expose this. We're going to get the action from the counter slice. So I'm just going to say constant object is equals to counter dot action, and you can see all of it. You can have the reducer path, reducer selectors. So I'm just going to get the action, and we can get increment here, and we can get decrement here. Now the error here should stop. So we've now defined the store. So what we can do, we can define the store here. We can say constant store is equals to configure store which takes an object. Then you can pass in the reducer. We can say counter slice. So we can get the action with counter slice. You can get the action and the reducer. So I'm just going to say counter slice dot reducer here, just like this. And this is how to, you can, instead of doing all of this, you just create a simple create slice, and this will expose the action and also the reducer for us. If you have multiple slices, you can make use of what we call the combined reducer. So I'll just say root reducer is equals to combined reducer, and this will help us to combine the reducers. For now, we can just say this is counter, and I'll just say counter slice reducer. Yeah, and then we can just copy the root reducer or combine reducer and just pass it. Then you can create more reducer if you want. You can create more and slice and then use that here. So now let's test this if it's working. And so I just come over here with load. And why is it not working? Let's see. Let me check. So I found the error why it's not working. So remember, we set a counter here. So to get this, we need to use state.counter. So I'll just change this to any for now. Save this now. You can see that the error has stopped. And if you have more than one initial state or states you want to store, you can just do counter 0 like this. And then you can just say state dot count plus one, state dot count minus one. Okay, it's going to throw some error. We're accessing directly, so we can just say state dot counter dot count, and this is going to give us count. Or you can just say get the count directly like this, putting this parentheses, and you can get the count here. So the reason why this is trying, so I'm just going to say sorry, plus equals to 1, and it says now writable, so I'm just going to say like this, and the error should stop. And if I do the same thing for this, the error, So say minus equals to 1 and the error should stop. So if I just reload this now and I click increments, you can see everything still works. If I click on decrement, everything still works. So this is how to use Redux Toolkit in your app. I'll just collapse this here. Now you just define the slice and then you get the action from the slice, you get the reducer from the slice, and then you pass in the reducer to the store. Then you just pass in the store directly to the provider. Then to get the state, you use a use selector to get the state. And this is pointed to the state because we have multiple, we're using multiple states here, multiple reducer, sorry. And then we get the count, then we update the state. So now if I go to now you can see that I have this Redux Dev 2. You can just search for Redux Dev 2 and then you can install it in Chrome. So I already have it in my and now let me just clear all of this. Now if I try to increment, so the reason why the dev2 is not working, we can just come over to the store and let's add dev2 to true. Save that, and then if I reload this now again, then if I click on increment, you should see this is working. You can see the latest. If I click this, you can see 2, and you can see that the state. If I click on action, you can see the action here, and then you can see the difference, the previous and the current state, and that's it. So if you notice, whenever I reload this, you can see that it has returned back to the initial value, which is 0. So how do we make sure our data stays, the state still stays the exact way even though we refresh? And that is where Windows persist comes in. So with Windows persist, it helps us to persist our data so it can be stored. Like for example, we can store that inside, if we go into application, into our local storage, we can store the state here. So let's install persist. So I'm just going to cancel my server. So I'm going to say npm install react persist, and that's it. So let's just do npm install react persist, redux persist, sorry. And then this is going to just install it. So let's run our server. So let's wait for this to run. So now it's complete as install. So now what we're going to do, we're going to have to import the first we're going to import from Redux persist is persist store. So say persist. So let me just say from Redux persist and persist store, and then persist reducer. And so we also need to import storage from Redux persist /lib/storage. And then we also need to import from Redux persist /integration/react. And this is just going to import persist git. So let's scroll down to where we have the root reducer, and this is where we're going to start to persist our data, the store. So we're going to first of all write a persist config. So I'll say constant persist config is equals to, we're going to have to give this a unique key. And so I'm just going to say, you can call this root. Most times we use root, or you can say test look like this, and this is going to in the local store is going to look like this: persist test root, just like this. So we need to also pass in the storage, which we imported from Redux and persist lib storage. And then we also have what we call the whitelist. The whitelist, which is an array, and we also have a blacklist. So the blacklist means that if you pass in, let's for instance, you pass in counter dot reducer. Sorry, you should okay counter slice dot reducer path, and this is going to tell the persist to not. It's going to tell it's going to make sure that persist does not persist this count slice. So this count reducer, I mean, then let's just comment it out. Let's see this in action first. Let's comment two of them. Then I'm just going to complete this. I'm going to say constant persist persisted reducer is equals to persist reducer, which is coming from here. And then I'm just going to say we're going to pass in the config, and we're going to pass in the root reducer, which is the combined reducers here. Now we have the persisted reducer. Now we need to pass it to the store. So we've persisted the reducer. Now we've persisted the reducer. Now we need to persist the store. So what we're going to do, we're going to say constant persist store is equals to persist store. So this should be persist store, more like this, or like this. Then we're going to pass in the store here. So we need to wrap the app with the persist. So we're going to make use of the persist kit. And so we're going to do that after this provider. We're going to just be below here, and here move the app, the contents inside here, or the components inside or the children inside the persist kit. Then we need to pass persist store. So let me just change this to persist store, and then pass persist store here. And persist also have loading. I'll just set loading to null like this. So this is it. So we are done with this. So this is all you need to do. So now let's reload. Let's go back to app, and you can see that this is shown here. If I drag this up, you can see count 0 and persist. So now if I try to increment this, you can see that local storage is showing the persist, and the name we defined here is test root. So I'll just increment this. I can decrement this. Then let me reload. This is 14. So if I reload this, we can still see the value. So if we use the blacklist and I save this and I clear everything here and reload, this is not supposed to show. So this is still showing. It's not supposed to show when you pass this reducer to blacklist. So I think I made a mistake. This should be small letter. So save this and let me clear the local storage again. And if I increment, you can see that the reducer everything returned back to 0. And you can see the persist store is showing the persist is showing the local storage, but we can't find the count again because we've blacklisted it. So if I reload this, it will set back to 0. But if I change this to whitelist, now we can see the zero now is showing, the count is showing, or the counter, and this is working fine. So this is how to use the persist in Redux, and also the Redux store. So if you want to make this, so let's go over to the documentation to show you how we can place this in its own separate file instead of the app.tx. And also this provider and persist kit shouldn't be in the app. Instead, it should be in the main.tx here. It should be here. Just say app like this. So this is how it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to revert all of this, then go back into the app, and let's head over to the documentation and see how we can place this. So I'll just head over to the documentation. Then if we go and click on Redux Toolkit, then I click on Get Started. Then I'm going to click on Quick Start. And if you click on Quick Start now, you can see how the documentation tells us how to create the files. We can just create apps.store.txt, and then you can copy the configure and store, the same thing we did. You just paste all those things inside the store file, and then you just copy that inside the main.txt. You wrap the entire app with it. Then inside, to create the slice, the counter slice, you define a future a future folder, features folder, and counter slice.txt, and then you pass the counter reducer to the in the store.txt, and then that is it. So I also have an example. So you can also look at my this repo, advancement AI financial SaaS platform. I use the Redux toolkit. You can just see how I use the Redux persist here, and see how I define. You can just go over this. Then in the hook, which this is where we just set the type, the use this patch. So we just pass the type. We are trying to add TypeScript to the use this patch, and you can see. Then we also have the use selector. We have to just pass in the type too, and then define it to use type selector. So you can just come over here and look at it, and also the features where we also have the auth slice, and then you can just see how we use create slice, auth, initial states, and then reducer. Just come over here and look at it. Also, Redux Toolkit, also if you go back to the documentation, Redux Toolkit offers also provide what we call RTK. Yeah, you say it. RTK query is used for fetching data, and you can see that here RTK query. And then if you scroll down, you can see how to use it to call an endpoint. Just do this like this, and you get the query, and you can use it to fetch data. I also use in this document in this repo, and you can see where I have the auth API, and I just use it. Sorry, inside the API dot client, you can just see how I use it to create API. So that is it for Redux and Redux Toolkit. So let's go ahead and so let's look at navigation in React. So to handle navigation in React, we need to use what we call React Router. And we can just come over to the documentation here, and then let's click on documentation. And this is going to take you to React Router homepage, and then you can click on installation here, and this is going to take you out to install React Router in your app. So let's just go back to the code and let's try and install React Router. So we're going to install React Router and React Router DOM. So I'm just going to close my terminal. Sorry, I'm going to open my terminal, and then let me cancel this site. So let's do npm install React Router DOM. And let's click on enter, and this should install React Router DOM for us. So let's wait for this to install. So this has installed, so I'll just run my server and let me close it. So the first thing we are going to do is let's remove all of this. I think we don't need, we can just leave it, but let's just remove it. So I'm just going to provide them inside the GitHub, so no worry. Remove all of this. So save this. Now our server is running. So the first thing we are going to do to use React Router in our project is to come inside the main.txx, and then let's import. The first thing we're going to import is the browser router. So let's import from React Router DOM, and then let's import browser router. And then we need to wrap our app with browser router. Now once you've wrapped the entire app, we can create a folder. Let's create a folder. I'll call this route. And then inside the route, I'm just going to say route here .txx. And then I'm going to call REFCE. I'm going to call this app router. App route. And then inside here, I'm going to copy this app. I'll go into app, and then I'm just going to replace it with this. So this is a component, so I'm just going to import it. Okay, let me just move this to the top here. So now inside the route, we're going to first of all create the pages we want, or just say pages. And there inside the pages, I'm going to create the first one. I'm going to call this home. I'm going to call the other about. So I'm just going to create a folder. Sorry, about. And I'll also create the folder. I'll call it 404 or not found. And then the last folder I'm going to create is posts. So these are the pages here. So let's create index.txx for all of them, or you can call home.txx. So let's just create index.txx, and for the post we can say index.txx here. And so RAFCE posts. I'll just copy this, go into not found. Then I'm going to select this and use Ctrl D and say not found. I'll go into home, do the same thing. I'm going to just select the name, home. Then lastly, the about page. I'm going to say about here. So save that. Now let's go into the route and let's use the route and get the pages inside here. So what we're going to install from React Router DOM, we're going to import route and routes. So let's just say React Router DOM, and then let's import routes, then routes like this. So now let's return routes which holds all the routes, and then we should have routes. This should be self-close here. So we are going to pass in the path, which is going to be /home, and then we need to pass in the element, and the element is going to be our components, which is from the page folder home. Then we can duplicate this, say about, and let's import about, then import posts. So I'll say about, and then posts. For a single post, we can use the the ID here. So for the not found, I'll say if the user passes the wrong path, then we can just catch the paths. We use asterisk and say elements not found components, and then like this. Now we've already defined uh let's look at this. So currently, okay, let me remove the home like this. And now we can see the home, but we need some kind of navigation at the top so we can switch between home, about, and then post. And that's where we can use the layout. So since all of them will have the same, we have the nav bar, we can come back inside SRC and create a file folder called layout or layouts. And I'm just going to call these layouts for now. TXX. I'll say RAFCA app layouts like this. I'll just remove this. Then inside here, I'm going to return a div, and then we can say nav. Let's give this flex and then gap 2. And now we need to have a link. Let's import that from React Router DOM. And we can say home. We can duplicate this so we can have about and then post 1 or post ID. So now this requires us to pass in 2, which is going to point to where we want this link to, which is slash, which is the same thing what we have here in the same part. So here we're going to say 2 to about slash about, and then to a single to the post ID, I'll say post slash, I'll give this 11, which is the ID, and that is because we set post slash column ID, semicolon ID. So that is it. So now, if we, how do we use this? So before we use this, we need to let's call the main.tx. Sorry, the main elements. Now we need to pass in outlets. So outlet is coming from React Router. This is going to, we're going to use the app layout to wrap the route. So this is going to tell React Router to place the home component here, to place everything from inside the home, everything from inside the about, to paste it inside this main element here. So let's just copy app layout and let's head over to route. Now, how do we use? So what we can do, we can just wrap um this entire route with route, and then we say this to parts slash element. You're going to import the app layout, and then let's move everything here. So now what we are going to do, we are going to just remove part for home. So this is going to point to the home, and we're going to set this to index like this. Then we need to remove the slash because we've defined slash here. Remove this. And once we save this, now you should see the home, about, and post ID. If I click on about, we have navigated to the about page. If I click on post ID, you can see that we have moved to post slash 11, and this is the post page. So this is how to handle navigation in React. So, but how can we get data from the URL like this 11? We can use some hook that React Router don't provide for us. So I'm just going to go into my post.txs here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get the ID, I'm going to make use of the use param hook. So let me just remove this type. And there I'm just going to I'm just going to get the param, which is going to be ID. You can do something like this, params, and then say params dot ID. So since I already know I need to get ID, I'm just going to get the ID directly from it. And then we can just So I'll just create a space here. I'll say h2 post ID, and let's just ID here. Now, if you check it, you can see we have 11. We also have another hook which is used to get the query, and that is the use search param hook. And then we can get the search param using an array. It's a search param, and then we can just say query constant query is equals to search param dot get, and we can just say q. You can just define it like this, and I'm just going to duplicate this. I'll say post query. I'll just pass in query here. So save it now in the URL. Currently, we don't have anything showing in the post query. So I'll just pass in a question mark and say q is equals to hello. And once I reload this, you can see hello here, which is coming from the query, search query. So that is it in React Router. And lastly, we also have the let me do that at the top here. We also have the navigation, which is, we can call this navigation. Navigate is equals to use navigate hook. And I can just call a button here. I'll say this should link to home. I'll say on click, and I'm going to just call this navigate. I'm going to pass in the path, which is slash. We can say slash home or slash. Okay, yeah, we are using slash. So if I click on home now button, this is taking us to home page. If I click, you can see that this is working fine. So that is it for React Router, and you can also check out the documentation if you need more to look at more of the features or hooks that is also being provided for React Router done. So let's head over to look at testing in React. So testing is important to avoid bugs and ensure our app works as expected. So there are different type of testing. We have the unit test, which we're going to work on. We have integration test and end-to-end test. So unit test is used to test smaller parts or isolated parts of your app. Like think of it like a single, like a function or components. We have the integration test, which is used to verify different parts of your app works together correctly. And then we have end-to-end test, which is used to stimulate real user interaction from the start of your app to the end of the start to finish. But in this video, we are going to focus on unit tests, like I said earlier. So there are different ways we can test our React app. We have Jest and Vtest. So I'm going to be using Vtest for this video because since Vtest is modern and fast, and you can see that it's also created by the people that created Vite. So let's go ahead and then install Vite test. So click on get started and copy this command, and let's head over to our code, and then let's install this. So I just open my terminal and then cancel this. So let's just clear everything here. We are not going to need, we are done with everything, writing of all of this. So let's just paste the command, and then let's install vtest. So we have installed it. So let's go into our package.json. We're going to add a script here. So I'm just going to add test and then test UI. This is coming from vtest and vtest and dash UI. So once you save this now, we have set up it. So we're going to first of all test for, we're going to go over some unit testing. We're going to do that with JavaScript first. Then before we go ahead and start testing our React component. So the first thing we need to understand about testing in general, we have what we call the A pattern. So the first A means arrange, where we set up everything we need for testing. The second A means act, which is where you perform the action that you want to test. Think of calling the function. Then we also have assets, which is used to verify the result of the action or what we want to expect. So I want to create a simple math function here we are going to test. So if you want to create your test folder, you can come here and just put a underscore underscore test like this, or you can set tests like this, and this is going to work. So I can also move it inside the unit test and it's going to work. But I'm just going to leave it here. Once we are done, I'll move it inside. So let's create the method we are going to use for testing. So let's create a function. So I'm just going to say export constant add. It's going to be a simple function. I'm just going to create a b, and this is just going to return a plus b, a math function. Then we can also have export. Let's do for multiply, or let's do for divide first. I'll show you another example. A b. Then we can say if b is equals to 0, then we can throw new error. I will say division by 0 is not allowed. You can, if you want to add subtraction, you can add subtraction, subtract a minus b. Then I also want to create the more complex one. We can call this factorial. This is going to take in n, and if n is less than 0, show new error number must be non-negative, and then we can return n is equals to 0. Then we return 1, else we say n. I will say n times factorial. I will say n minus 1 like this. So let's create a file here. We can call this math util, and then you put in text because this is how vtest is going to get the test. I'll say jx, and then this is it. So let me just move this inside here. So you just inside this unit testing function. So inside the test, remember we mentioned the AAA pattern. So let's just look at it here. So the first thing we are going to do in testing is to import what we call we're going to import describe. So let's come get fit test. Describe it and then expect. So what is describe? So describe is used to group related text, while it is an individual text. So we're going to set called describe. Then in describe, we need to give this a name, a description, and I'll just say description, or let's say example. Then this is going to return a function. Yeah, inside the function, now we can make use of the and test case is the test. So it, you can use it, or you can just use test like this, and both will work. So I'm just going to use it, and then we need to give this name of the test, description of the test. I'll say should add numbers correctly, and then this is going to return a function, and there's where the first a, which is called arrange. So this is basically to set up the data. So we're going to say constant a is equals to 2. This is an example. We're going to import the method we've defined in the math util.jx. So let's say constant b is equals to 3. Now we need to the second a, which is at. This is to perform action, perform the action like calling the function. So I'll just say constant results. This is where we do the action. We add the numbers. Say a plus b. And then the last one is what we call the asset, which is to verify the results. So we're going to use expect results dot, and you can see that we are going to have different. So let's just get to b. Okay, now you can see all of the assets here. So I'll just pick on to b for now and just say we are expecting 2 plus 5 2 plus 3 to be 5. Now once we save that to run our test, we can just open our terminal. Then remember if I open the package.json, you can see we have tests and you also have UI too. We're going to check it out. So I'm going to clear my terminal and I'll just say npm test, or I say npm t, and this is going to um, run the test, and you can see that it passed one pass successfully. So I'm just going to remove this. So if you want to use the UI, you can just say test npm run test UI, and this is going to ask you to install vtest/ui. You can just say yes, and this is going to install vtest UI. So you have to wait for this to install. So now you can run the npm run test UI, and this should open a link. Okay, it has given, you can see, just copy this, or it has opened it here, and you can see the test. You can click here. Let me zoom this thing out so you can see clearly. Then I'm going to click on, you can see my test example, which is a group. Then you can see each of the test cases, and you can see that this pass, you can see the code, and I think nothing happens. But if I pass in save it here and save, this should show error, and you can see it says test fail. So I just pass 5. So this is how to use the AAA pattern in testing. So let's go ahead and then test these functions here. So I'm just going to go at the top and let's import. So let me import all of these functions. So say import uh import from dot math test. Sorry, math.jx, and then let me just import add think subtract, subtract, divide, and factorial. Yeah, so let's close this. So I'm going to change the name of this test case, this test. I'm going to change the description to math utility. Then I'm going to change this to okay. This is okay. Then now we can test the maths. So I'm going to just use this. Then instead of adding it directly, I'll just call the math function, the add function, sorry. And then I'm going to pass the A and B. And then they should work. So our test passed successfully. So if I change this now to 9, they should fail. So now we have to be, I can also expect again the add -2, 3. dot not, we can say to be first. Let's say so we -5, and let's save this. And then this one failed, so we can just set this back to 5. And I think we failed here. Just change this to -1, and then it should. Why is it failing? Sorry, 1. So I think I made a mistake. This should not be. Yeah, it should be dot to be or -1. Let's see. And this has passed. So this is working fine. So we can also say dot not to be 5, and this is going to pass. So in VTest we have all of these assets here. You can make use of it. So we can go over to the documentation again in VTest, and then you can come over to where we have uh experts, think API. You can see experts here. And once you click on this, you can see there are numbers of experts here that we can use to test our functions. So I'm just going to go over everything. So let's go back to the code, and then let's continue testing this. So I'm just going to okay, we've done the math test here. Let's handle for subtraction and then division. So I can copy this here, and I'll just say let me remove this. I'll just say 2, or let's change this to 6, 2, and then let's say subtract, and the result should be 4. And if you save that, sorry, we need to change this, should subtract 2 numbers correctly. And you can see 2 tests as passed. So let's copy this and handle division. So in the division, if you look at the file, we have we didn't return anything here. So return A divided by B like this. So let's head over to the test, and then yeah, and sorry, let's come back to the file. You can see that we have 2 outcome here. So if a user pass B0, this should throw an error. If user pass the correct values, and it should um, div divide the numbers. So I'm just going to go into my test, and we're going to test for the 2 scenario. So I'm just going to change the name here to should divide 2 numbers. You can see to divide 2 numbers correctly, and then I'm going to just let's just say this to 10, and let's say it's to 2, and then let's say divide A and B, and the result should be 5. And this pass. So I just want to make this, now you understand the error, I want to make this smaller. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this, paste it here, and then I'm just going to remove this. So make it more quicker. Then this is working. We can also check for, let's say, and make to divide 2 numbers or throw error when dividing by 0. So what we are going to do, we are going to come down and say expect, and then we're going to say let's call the function. We say divide, and we're going to give this 5 0. So we're going to use the to throw error, and we're going to have to pass the same message we passed here. So copy this, and let's head over back to the test case, and let's paste it on. So once you open this, you can see the test passed, If we are to separate this test as a standalone, you can say should throw error. I'll just say it's to 5, 0, and I'm just passing A and B. And let me just comment this one out, save this, and if I open, you can see 4 tests passed. So let me just combine them into one. So I'll just remove um, this one. So let's do the last test, which is the factorial function. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to, let's pass in the factorial, let's say value. I'll just remove this. I'll just say 5 of n5. Then let's say factorial n. And then this should give us 120 like this. So, and then we can also say factorial -1. So we want to test for case where we pass in a uh, a negative value. So I'm just going to copy the same message here. And let's head over to the math test and let's paste this here. And now if I open this, you can see 4 tests pass. If I remove one letter from the message, get this pass. So let me just remove all of this. And we can see that this failed. We passed. So that's correct. So we have tested the method we've created, the mathematical method we've created. So you can also use the it to add multiple uh, values and multiple numbers. I can say it.h and I pass in an array, and then this is going to take in the first letter, the first number 2 plus 3 is equals to 5. I'll say 5 plus 5 is equals to 10. And then we are going to say dot. So not dot, we're going to go, and we're going to say add, you're going to use the percent %i and I. So this is going to tell VTest that this 2 should be this, then 3 is this, then this to equal the last number. Then we can get it like this: A, B, and expected. So let's return. I'll say constant results is equals to add A, B, and then we are expecting the results. Then you can pass in the expected value. So save this, and then our test has passed, and you can see 6 tests passed. You can see add 2 and 3 to equal 5, add 5 and 5 equals 10. So this is it for a unit test. Let's look at some example. So I'm just going to create a new file here. I'll just call this utils.jx. So I'm just going to test for string, array, and other type. So I'm just going to paste this one, which is uppercase, and then we have the reverse. Then for array, we have exports constant, remove export constant, remove duplicates. We're going to pass in the array, and then we're going to return new set, and let's pass in the array. And the last one, we are going to, sorry, we are going to also test for objects. An example of testing objects, we say constant merge objects is equals to objects one, objects two, and let's just say objects one, objects two. And the last one is for async function. So I'll say export constant fetch user or promise. So I'll just say if let's pass in ID. Let's say if not ID, then let's return a reject promise. Let's say reject ID not pass. Then return promise dot resolve ID name John. By this, so let's create the test. I'll say all utils dot text dot jx here. So similar to what we have here, I'll just copy this. So let me paste it here. And then I'll just say all utils and let's just get this. And then we can get all the functions here. So to uppercase, reverse, remove, duplicate, merge objects, and also fetch user. So here we're going to use, I want to group the test. I can use the describe again here. I can say this test case should be for string, sorry, strings. Then we can just use the it should return string uppercase. So say expect to uppercase React, then to be React uppercase like this, and the test pass. You can see one pass. Then I can also do for the reverse. I'll say I should return reverse string, and I'll say React. Then I'll say I'll use the backward of React AR. Save this and sorry, we are using. Let's change this to reverse instead of uppercase, and this should pass. So let's just copy this again, and let's call this for arrays. I'll say should remove duplicates array. So I'm just going to define the numbers here. I'll just say 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, or 4 and 5, 5 here. So let's say results, or let me just pass it here like this. I'll just say remove duplicates. Okay, I want to use this. So let me just remove this. So let me say constant results is equals to remove duplicates, and let's pass in the arrays. And then we're going to say a result, and we're going to use to equal. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 5 like this. And then we can also use it to be is 5. And if I save this, let me just comment this out. I'll say dot length, and this should pass. So we're going to look at equal and to be later on. Let's just complete this. We're going to look at the meaning and everything, and most of the assertion you're going to use um, to test your function or app. So let's just handle I think it's only one array we have. Let's implement for objects. So I'll just copy this objects. Let me remove this. So let's change this to merge two objects, and this is going to override any duplicates. So I'm just going to define two objects here, A1, B2, B3, C4. So this is going to update the B. Then we can just change it to merge objects. Let's pass in object 1, object, object 2. And then I'm going to change this. This is going to be equal. And then we're going to just say object A should be 1, B should be 3, and C should be 4. And then if I you can see that the test passed. So the last one is the fetch, or I mean the promise. I'll just say promise. Yeah, and then since we are handling promise, we're going to change this to async. We're going to add async here, and I'm just going to say constant data is equals to await fetch user. And remember, we need to pass an ID. Then I'm going to say expect data dot to equal ID 1, name John. And if I open, you can see our test pass. So I think I didn't change the description for this. I'll just say should resolve with user data. So let's just copy this again and let's paste it here. And we should handle the reject. So I'm just going to remove the ID. And I'm going to say, let's just say fetch user. And then I'm going to just remove the equal. I'm going to say dot reject dot to be. And then we can get the response, sorry, from the utils.json. I'll just say ID not pass. I'll paste it here, and then you can see our test pass. So that is how to handle and test unit testing in JavaScript. So let's look at some examples. So let me just go ahead and just copy only this, paste it here, and let me go ahead and import copy the imports, and I'm going to paste it here. So we're going to look at all some of the examples of the assertion assets we're going to use. So the first one is the to be. So this helps to check if both value are equally the same. So let's look at it. So I'm going to say to be, and then let's just return a function, and let's say expect, let's say a constant, a is equals to 5. I'll just say a dot to be 5. So if I hover over this, you can see checks that a value is what you expect. It calls to compare the value. So don't use it for floating points. And you can see example. You can see checks whether the values are the same. So we have the other one which is called to equal. So this helps to check if two objects or array have the same value. So you can see that in this test we use it to check if the arrays has the same values. As a result from this, remove duplicate arrays, and also we use it for the object. So the use equal is used to check if two objects or array have the same value. So you can just do that here. Let me just go ahead and copy that object we use here, and I'm just going to paste it here. I will just change this to name Sam. Then I'm going to just say name Sam. And if I pass this here, I'll say, sorry, object 1 to be equals to object 2. And then this should, sorry, this should be equal to be equal. And this pass. So we also have another example of to equal, but this time this is to equal street. Sorry, to street equal. So the street equal helps checks for missing value and also the types. So why equal checks for compared to array? It does not care if I add a new field like let's say. So if I add at the top of this, if I add DOP, I'll just give it any number to undefined, and I compare this object 1 with this. Let's just comment object 2. So I want to show you the difference between the equal to and the two street equal. So if I just say if this sum is equals to object sum, and I save this, you can see that it's passed. It does not compare or have any issue with the DOB undefined. But if I copy the straight equal, paste it here and save this, now this shows an error. And you can see this shows an error. So that's the difference between uh, equal and then straight equal. So I'm just going to comment this, and let me pass it here. So let me change this to straight equal by this and direction true pass. We can also use an array. So I'll just change this to array, and just change this to array 1 and then array 2, and everything should still work. If I change this to 4, it should fail. So that's it. So let's look at to be truthful. So I'm just going to copy this. So I'm just going to say to be truthful. Truthy, sorry, not truthful, truthy. Truthy matcher. Then I'm just going to remove this and say constant number is equals to 5. Then what I can do, I can say expect number dot to be truthy. And if I save this, now this work. So this is true because 5 is regarded as positive or true. So if I set -1, this work. So I think it's not -1. If you set null, this will throw an error here. If you set false, if this is false, this will throw an error. Undefined, this will throw an error. Or if it's a number, let's try a string. This pass. So like this. So look, let's look at another example. We say expect number, but this time we are going to use to be greater than 4. Let's see. And this pass, so this matchup passed. So if I say 5 and this fail, so we also have to be greater than equal or equal to, let's say 5 and this pass, this pass, let's say it's to 10 and this fail. So let's check, let's duplicate this and test for to less than, to less than 4 fail, to less than 6 pass. So let's look at string. I'll just say this is hello world, hello. Then I'll say expect string, sorry, expect string to contain hello. Let's just change this to hello world. I'll save this and this passed. So if I change this like this and this fail. So let's look at another example. We can use to match, and this we just take the regular express. Okay, we can pass in a regular expression or a string. So I'm just going to paste this like this, and this should fail. So let's put I, and this should pass. So I makes it to avoid to case sensitive. So if I remove it now, it's fail. So this work. So let's look at objects. Let me just copy this object here, paste it here, and then we can use some other matches here. I'll say expect object one dot have, let me put dob here 111. I'll say expect to have property, yeah, have property uh, dob. If I save this and this pass, if I save this and this fail, so this is working. Then we can just say object dot name. I'll say to be defined and this part. So that's it for the unit testing, basic unit testing. So let's go ahead and start our React testing. Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to install some packages which we need for React testing. So let's open the terminal. I will cancel this and then let me clear my terminal and let me paste this here. So the first thing we're going to install is the testing library for React. So this is going to be used to test React components. Then we have the JS DOM. So this is going to provide a visual browser environment where our testing is going to run since we are testing for UI components. So we also have the testing library JS DOM. So this is going to add like a custom matcher. So we've seen some of the matchers like the to be stuff like that. So this is going to add some other ones which we're going to use for testing React component like it will be in the document and much more. So we have this is just a type of jest and let's just install this, and this is a dev dependency. So let's wait for this to install. So this has installed completely. We also have another package. Let's just install the testing library DOM. So this allows us to work directly with the DOM, like the low level utilities to work directly with the DOM. So once you install that, now let's go ahead and set up testing for our React app. So the first thing we are going to do is to create a vit test config, and that is going to be below here. So I'll just create a file. There's a vit test.config.txt here. And then once you've created this, then let's come inside here and let's import some packages. We're going to import from the vtest/config, and here we're going to import default config, and here let's say export default config. Let's say default, sorry, not default config, define config. And then let's pass in default here. And inside here, we're going to return objects. Now we can pass in a plugin. So we want to test for React. So I'll just import the React plugin. I'll say React from at vit.js plugin React. Now we can pass in text. And then I'll say environment. So we want to change the environment from Node to JS DOM since we are testing for React and React requires it. Then we can also set globals here. True. So this will enable test to, so instead of importing describe and it, so this is going to make it global. Then we need to also point to our setup file. So I'll say set up files like this, and we're going to point to text. We have not created the folder. We're going to create also setup.txt. So let's create the folder here, and I'm going to create the folder outside here. I'll say text, and then we're going to create the setup file .txt here. And inside the setup, remember we installed the CS, the testing library JS DOM. So let's just copy this. So, so let's import that. I'll say import, and let's just import the custom matcher. So now we are done with this. So what we're going to do, we're going to create our components here. And inside here, I want to create, I'll test the button components which we've defined here. So I'm just going to create a file. I'll just say button.text.txt here. And now we can use the describe and we can say button component. And then let's return this. S- And you can see that this is not showing any error, and we didn't import describe. So let's import the button from dot components, sorry, not src slash components dot button like this. So now we are going to use the it. I'll say should render a button component. So we're going to first of all render, and render is this is going to render the component, the button component in the visual DOM for testing. So I'm just going to copy this, and we need to import this from our testing library. So I'll say import from at testing library React. So let's import render, and now we need to pass in the component. We say button um so the reason why this is trying error, we need to change this to txx. Then I'm going to set this to click me. And so now how do we get the button? So we are going to use the screen. So the screen is used to find and interact with elements in the rendered output. So once we render the button, we can use screen uh, to find the element or interact with that element or component. So I'm just going to say constant text, or let's say constant button is equals to screen. So we're going to find for the screen, we're going to find it by get by, and you can see screen has so many methods here. You can say get by text, and this text is click me, which we define here. And if I paste it here, now we have the button. So we can expect button dot to be, and if we check, we can see to be in the document. This is coming from the testing JS DOM. And now once we save this and run our tests, I'll say npnt and then this thing run. We say error. Let me save this thing again. And then this still failed. I noticed what happens. I made a mistake. This in the test and fifty test config reset test. So let me just create this, rename this to test. So now I've changed it to test, and let's run the test again and let's see if this is going to work. So we can see that the test from the test folder component button passed. So this is working. So this is good. So we are getting the button using the get by text, but we have another method we can use, which is relatively the best way uh, to get the elements from the DOM. I will just copy this and then paste it here. And then this is called get by row. So I'll just say get by row, and then this is going to get by row. So and we can say this is going to be button. Now I want to get a specific button by the row because we might have multiple buttons and we want to get a specific button. So what we can do, we can say, we can pass in an option here. I'll say name of the button. If you hover over this, you can see matcher, row, and option. So we can use the matcher we used before. The regular expression, sorry. I'll just say click me and I'm going to put I there. And once I save this, and you should wait for this to run, you can see the two tests passed. But if I just remove this, let's see, and it failed. But if I remove these options, this option, this should pass. And you can see how to use the get by row to get these components or elements from the DOM and then check if it exists in the document. So we also have a different way to test button. So I'm just going to go into the button components and we're going to use the test ID. So I'm just going to say data dash test ID is equals to custom button and save this. Now I can just copy this, paste it here. Now I'll say whether this one was to get by row using the button using get by row. Now this is going to be get a button using test ID. So now I can say get by test ID and then I'm just going to pass in the test ID which is custom button. Now if I save this, let's see, and it passed. So it worked fine. So how do we test when a button is clicked to know if the button is actually clicking? So we can install a package called useEffect. So let me just cancel this and then do npm install testing library user event and let me just install this. So this has installed and also I made a mistake. So this should be saved as install as dev dependency. So let's just run the test again and then let's import the user event. Sorry from at testing user event. So now you can, if you hover over this, you can see we have clear click, copy cuts, double click, hover keyboard tabs, and some other events, a typical um, mouse we have. So I'll just copy this and I'm going to paste it here. Now I'm going to change the description to show render button, show render button and respond to click. And so we can just say button now. So let's define a function here. I'll say a method here. I'll say handle click is equals to v1 vi. So let's import vi from vit dot function. So let me import vi from vtest. Now we can just say copy this and let's pass in on click here and paste this here. Now we can get this by with the test ID. Now let's fire the event. So we're going to await the user event. So that means we're going to change this to async here. I'm going to say user event dot, and you can see click, and let's pass in the button. Now we can move this expect to the top, and then we can say um, expect handle click. Then I'm going to say to have been called times, there's only once. So I'll save this and let's wait, and it passed. So this is working uh, fine. So let's look at other examples. So I'm just going to create a component here. I'll just create an example component. Let's just create let me just create a file instead of folder .txx, and I'm going to paste a components I've written like input React testing, a link. We have inputs, multiple inputs, and multiple image. So we're going to test this example component. So I'll go back into my testing and let's create the test example dot test dot cxx here. So we are going to let's use the describe here. So I'll just say describe, and let's call this example components. Now we are going to be writing the test. I'll say the first thing we are going to test, we're going to test the heading. We're going to test inside example.txt, we're going to test the heading. So I'm just going to go back to example test and say should render the correct heading. So let's return a function. And now we can do render and passing example components. Let me import, okay. Let's import it here. Example from src slash component slash example. And let's import render from testing, render and screen from testing library React. So now since we are going to be testing for all of this, all I'm going to do instead of rendering the components every test case, I'm just going to use the before each. So before each test, render the example. So this is only useful when you're not passing any prop to the components. So there's no need for me to render this again. So I'll just comment this. Now let's get the heading. I'll say heading is equals to screen dot get by text React testing. And then I'm going to say expect heading dot to be in the documents. And this test should run. And we can see it passed. So the next thing we are going to test is the input. And this input has a test ID custom input. So we also have the placeholder. So we're going to go back to the test, example test. And there we're going to first of all test for the placeholder. I'll say should find an input. So let me uncomment this input placeholder. And then let me remove this. I say constant inputs is equals to screen dot get by placeholder text. I'll say enter text. And exactly what I passed here, enter text. So now I'm going to expect this to be in the documents. So let's wait. And this has passed. So let's just close this. Now let's test for the test ID. And no, I'm going to use it in test ID, but this time I want to be able to type in the input to see the input work. So I'm just going to go into my test case, and then here I'm going to use the user event which we install. So copy this and let's head over to the example.txt and let's import this here. So inside here, we're going to change this to async, and I'm going to say should find and update or find and type, um, or let's say should find and type in the inputs elements like this. So the first thing we're going to do is to set up user is equals to user event dot set up. Then we need to get the input. I'll say get by test ID, and let's get the test ID, which is custom input. And let's pass in the test ID here. Now we need to type. So we're going to say await user dot type input. I'll say hello. And let's make sure that input dot to have value in the input hello. We can also test check if the input is in the document. So save this and let's open and let's hope this works. So it works. So it's run very fast. So this worked. So now we have seen how to type into the input. We've also seen how to click a button that we've tested for placeholder and when a user type. So now let's go ahead and test for the href. So I'm just going to go back to my test and let's copy this and let me remove everything here. I'll remove the async here. So I'm just going to find the A elements, the A tag with a specific href. So remove this and then inside there you're going to just get this. I'll say constant link is equals to screen dot get by row link, and then we can pass in the name. Let's go to name, visit Google. I'll just pass it here. And now what we can do, we can expect link dot to have attributes href, and there we can pass in the link which is directly to google.com. So just pass it here and save this and hopefully this should work. So we failed. Okay, we add some space here. So let me save this again and it passed. So we can also say expect Okay, now we don't need to do this. So let's also so we've tested for the inputs. Now we need to test for this inputs here. We have multiple inputs here, two inputs here, and we also have two images. So to use that, there are different we have the get all by. So we can use the get all by to get more than one element from the DOM. So I'm just going to um, say should render multiple input elements. So now how do we can say input. So I say get all by placeholder text. And so because two of them has different placeholder, we are going to just copy the first one and we are going to use regular expression, and I'm going to just pass it here. I then they should give me expect input, and I'm going to just say to be 2. Sorry, dot length. And if I inspect this, sorry, if I open my terminal, you can see that this run. So what if we want to check if this element is in the DOM and also is disabled? So what we can do, we can loop through the inputs. I'll say input for each input, and let's say expect inputs dot to be in documents, and let's copy this and say to be disabled. So if I save this now and let's open the terminal, and you can see that it's passed. So this is working. So let's also do the same thing for the image. So I'm going to say render multiple image. Let's check. We have same image. So let's go into the text and into the text. So let's get the images. I'll say get all by alt text, and let's just press sample image like this, and exactly what I pass in the alt. So now I'll just say images, and I can use, instead of using images dot length, we also have a matcher that we can say images dot to have length, and we say length 1. We sure this is going to give us sample image. Let's check this. If we say 2, let me remove this, and let's open our terminal. Let's see if this will fail. So this failed. So it's not able to get the two images because sample is missing. Okay, this is having image 2 and this is a different name. So we can just say 1, and this should pass. And now we can say expect images, say in sorry image index 0 dot to be in documents, and let's see if this will pass, and it passed. So lastly, let's test a separate component again, and this component is going to have the use state. So let's just create a toggle.txx. I'll say RESCE, and let me just remove this. So I'm going to use constant use state, default value will be false. And I'll say if this is visible, set is visible, then we can have constant on toggle is equals to set is visible, previous state is equals to, sorry, not equals to, not previous state. So let's say if it's visible, then we want to show the message. We say the message is visible. And then we have a button as a toggle. And this will have on click on toggle like this. So let's create a test for this. So I'm going to my test folder inside the component. I'll just say toggle.text.txx. So let's just copy all of this. So yeah, I'm just going to use the scribe toggle components. I'll say it should toggle text when click. So since we're going to use user event, we're going to set this to async. So now let's render the toggle components. Sorry. So let me import that here. So now what we're going to do, we're going to get the button. So say button is equals to screen dot get by row. So we want to get the button, this button, and this has the button row. And then the option we can say this has name toggle, and that's exactly what we have here. So now we've gotten a button. Now we need to first of all we need to also let's also check that this p tag is not visible. So we're going to say expect screen dot, this time we're going to use query by text, and then this is just used if I hover over query by. So the query by in the query by method is used to check, it's used to return null if not found. So this is used to check for absence of an element. So since we know that p is going to, the p tag here is going to be it's not going to exist in the DOM. So this is going to throw a null for us. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go into the top and let's copy the message. So we're getting by test. So we're going to just pass this. I'm just going to use regular expression. And then I'm going to say dot to be null. So now we are sure that this should be null. Let's try and click the button. So we're going to say await a user event dot click. button like this. So once we've clicked the button, so now we can expect this. So this time we're going to use get by instead of query by. So we're going to say get by text, and this should be in the document. In the documents, yeah, like this. So so let's make sure this is running. So it's passed. So we should also check that if this is clicked, we should also make sure the toggle is working. So I'm just going to go back to the test. Then I'm going to try and click this button again. And if I click this button, this should be, the text should be hidden. And if I save this and let's run this, and you can see that it's worked. So this worked very fine. So that is it for our components testing. So let's head over to the documentation and let's see some of the queries you can use in test library. So if I go over to get started, so let's click on queries and you can see get by row, and get by row has get by row, query by row, get all by row, query all by row, find by row, find all by row. So find by row. So when you're using find, this is more like the async where you have to add async, and this wait for the element to show and to load in the DOM. So we've seen how to use the query by, then this is a get all by. So we also have by label text, we have by placeholder, by text, by display. This is get by display value, get by uh query by display value. We have, but we've seen auth gets by auth text. We also seen gets by placeholder text, gets all by placeholder text. We have the display value, we have the auth, we've seen auth, we have title, we have text ID. So you can also see user action. So we have fire events. We have this, but we didn't use this in our example. So instead we use the use event and so other stuff you can learn from this. So just head over to the documentation and you can cover most of the examples. Most of this you can go over all of this and you can see some of the examples they gave you. So that's it for the end of this tutorial. So make sure you hit the subscribe button.